Well done for deciding to do some revision for your RS exam. It's Hindu practices questions that we're going to be looking at in this video. So just watch the video and think in a real exam, that's the kind of stuff that you need to be writing. Okay, good luck. So this is one of the multiple choice 1 mark questions, probably the easiest questions possibly on any exam that you'll do, and the command word really is, well, often it says which, so it's asking you to identify. This one hasn't really got a command word, but it's just asking you a straight up question: how often does Kumbh Mela take place? So it means that you have to know what the Kumbh Mela is. Hopefully you might remember that that's a religious festival that Hindus go to. It's celebrated on river sites along the river Ganges. This question actually caused a bit of controversy because some people, or a lot of people, thought that the answer wasn't one of the ones that was available here. The Kumbh Mela style celebrations occur every 3 years. So that's the answer here. But I think the Kumbh Mela, on loads of websites like Wikipedia and BBC and things, it says that the Kumbh Mela celebrates the cycle of 4 times of these celebrations, and so that lots of people said, well, hang on, the answer's 12 years here, but and I'm not sure how they got around that, but I think if you said every 3 years, you'd have got a point. That's the one that the mark scheme says is the correct answer anyway. So you either know this or you don't. So again, I say all the time with these 1 mark questions, don't get stressed out if you don't know the answer, because it's not worth your worrying about too much. It's only 1 point. But yeah, so just select the correct one and move on quickly. Okay, this question is a 2 mark question, and it's asking you to give 2 focuses of worship for Hindus. So the command word is give, and it's asking you about what they focus on when they worship. So I think that's quite a tough question really, because often it's not obvious what the question setter is looking for here. But I think if it's asking you about worship and the focuses of worship, then it makes sense to me to think, well, what are they focusing on when they worship? So I would, and because it's only a give question, you don't have to really explain very much. You just got to give 2 focuses of worship. So 1, I would put, well, some Hindus, when they worship, probably focus on the Trimurti, Brahma, Vishnu and Shiva, whereas some might focus on Niguna Brahman, which is Brahman not in any form. And because it's a give question, you don't have to explain anything. You can just write 2 answers, and I think that would probably get you 2 marks. So these are nice, quick, easy questions really, the 2 markers. So you just need to write a couple of things that are relevant, and then you can just move on. Okay, so this question is a 4 marker, and it's asking you to explain 2. So the command word is explain, which means you say something and then elaborate on it to show your understanding. This particular one is asking you to explain 2 contrasting forms of worship between Shaivism and Vaishnavism. So obviously the key words that you need to know there are what Shaivism and Vaishnavism are, but also take note in this question that it's asking you for contrasting forms. Sometimes on the morals questions it's even more important to remember that if they're asking for similar or contrasting teachings about a certain issue, because if you just do similar ones then you're going to only get 2 marks instead of 4. But hopefully on this one, as long as you know that Shaivism is the group that prioritize and worship Shiva predominantly, and Vaishnavism is the group that focus and worship Vishnu as the main godhead, then hopefully that would set you up with everything that you need to know to be able to answer this question really well. So again, if you're not so sure about the forms of worship that they might do, you can probably still get away with getting some good marks on this question just by trying to remember what you do know about each of these groups. So if you're not sure of any of the differences, just say what each group does and what they might focus on in their worship, and you'll still be able to get 4 marks, because by explaining that you'll understand, or you'll show understanding of the differences. So firstly, I'm going to start off by explaining more about Vaishnavism. So I'll say I'll say something like Vaishnavites focus on Vishnu. As their main deity. And then just think to yourself, well, what does that mean? What are they going to prioritize in their worship? So I'll put a comma and then say, therefore, they will worship avatars. Because remember that avatars are incarnations of Vishnu. So if they prioritize Vishnu, they're going to worship the avatars. And the one that they mainly focus on in the West especially is Krishna. And I mean, that might get 2 marks up until now, but just to make sure, I'm just going to say something else about that as well, and say they are more likely to focus on texts such as the Bhagavad Gita. Because that's a text in which Krishna appears to a charioteer and teaches him all about the ways of life and sacrifice and duty and all that kind of stuff. So Vaishnavites have been well sort of up to speed with what's in that text. Right, so then hopefully that will be 2 points so far. But remember, it's asking you for contrasting forms, so you need to focus on the people followers of Shiva as well. So I'll say followers of Shiva, on the other hand, they believe they have more of a focus on the unity between the individual Atman and Brahman. They kind of believe that the Atman is a part of Brahman and they're one and the same thing. So, and when you die and achieve moksha, you'll be reunited with Brahman. So, as a result of that, in their worship, they may focus more on Astanga Yoga, which is meditation, and because their aim is to unify with Brahman. And like all of these 4-marker questions, just realise after you've done it you could even draw a line in between them and say, look, here is where I've explained and elaborated on what followers of Vishnu would do, and here is the Shiva part. And again, as long as you've said a couple of relevant things and developed them for each side, then you should be able to pick up 4 out of 4 marks, which is obviously what you're aiming for. This next question is asking you to explain 2 ways in which cows receive protection in Hindu society. So I'll just highlight the command word, which is explain. So again, that just means that you say 2 ways in which cows receive protection, and then elaborate and say more about each way until you manage to get 4 marks. Here, because this is a 5-mark question, the 5th mark is for referring to some sacred writings or other source of authority. That doesn't mean that you have to quote directly from a scripture or anything like that. And usually 9 times out of 10, if you do say something that is also, described in a text somewhere or spoken by a Hindu source of authority, you're just going to pick up that 5th mark naturally anyway. So anyway, we'll start off, explain 2 ways in which cows receive protection. Well, one way is that in most Hindu cultures, I'll just start writing this as I'm saying it. People choose to be vegetarian. So obviously they then do not eat the cows. It's one of the, well, I suppose it's the main problem that cows have in their lives, getting killed and eaten by us lot. I'll just add in though that they do not eat cows, but they greatly respect them. That's probably enough to get 2 marks, but I'll just give a couple of examples of that, about how they respect the cows. So they stop traffic to allow them to move freely. Yeah, I mean that'll probably do. That's one way in which they protect cows. They don't eat them and look after them. Another way, just say in the next half of this one, another way is they provide sanctuary to cows. They set up places which are called Gaushalas. Gaushalas are places set up to look after cows specifically. I went to one recently at Bhaktivedanta in Hertfordshire, and they have all the cows there, and you can just they milk them naturally. They feed them and leave them alone pretty much. Set up to look after cows. I'll say that to get my final mark. Actually, I'll just say e.g. Bhaktivedanta. I'm going to spell that wrong because I've written it. Bhaktivedanta Manor has a Gaushala. Excellent. So again, the only thing I'm a bit concerned with about this question is I might not have referred to a source of Hindu belief or teaching or something like that. I've sort of run out of room as well. But what I'll say at the very bottom is, just to make sure about that, I'll just say that Hindus believe that cows have Atmans, just like humans. Atmans too. And I think that by the time you've explained that, I might have given too much of an example up in the top bit there, but I'm pretty sure that I'd be giving that 5 marks if I marked that one for the exam board. So yeah. Right, so you're on to the 12 marker. Excellent. This one asks you to evaluate the following statement. Varanasi is the most important place of pilgrimage for Hindus. And in your answer, you should refer to Hindu teaching, give reasoned arguments to support the statement, and then give reasoned arguments to support a different point of view. And finally, reach a justified conclusion. So remember that the command word is to evaluate. So that just means that you have to weigh up what that statement is saying, argue it from both sides, just basically decide if it's true or not. Just to make sure that you know some of the key words in here, Varanasi refers to probably is the most important place of worship, pilgrimage for Hindus, and pilgrimage just means a spiritual journey, like a journey to a special place. So it's arguing whether or not that one is more important than the others, essentially. So what you need to do is make sure that if you're talking about some Hindu teachings, if you're talking about pilgrimage, you'll be already referring to Hindu teaching. So for paper 1, it's less of a worry to make sure that you have to put religious content in than it is in paper 2. Anyway, focus on giving arguments to support the statement, and then give arguments to support a different point of view. Make sure that you manage to reach a conclusion by the end. So the way I recommend doing these is, firstly, get your head into agreeing with the statement. No matter what that says, you are going to start with I agree because, and write that down, and then just think of as many reasons as you can as to why Varanasi is the most important place of pilgrimage for Hindus. Try and come up with about 3 or 4 points, and make sure that when you've made a point, you don't just leave it there. Write another sentence or 2 to try and elaborate on it and explain why you've said what you've said. So my first paragraph will go something a bit like this. It would say, I agree because Varanasi is the most important holy site in Hinduism. It's the birthplace of Lord Shiva, so is especially important to Shaivites. That's point 1. It's also on the river Ganges, which is a sacred river. Many Hindus believe that they can be closer to moksha if they bathe in the river, as the holy water can cleanse them of their sins and bring good karma. This will help them to a better reincarnation. Many Hindus also have their ashes put into the river, so it's a very important place for them to go to. There are many holy temples there, and lots of other pilgrims go there. It's possibly the most visited site for Hindus, and so there is a strong tradition of going there and finding it spiritually helpful. And then when you've run out of ideas, then think, right, I'm going to get my head into thinking now the opposite. Varanasi is not the most important place of pilgrimage for Hindus. And no matter what you've written in the first bit, always leave a line to show the examiner that now you're arguing the opposite side. And begin this second paragraph with something like however, or another way of thinking about it is, and just do exactly the same. Just keep trying to generate some ideas in your mind. Make sure that you say an extra sentence or 2 after each point to explain it. However, it may not be the most important place for many Hindus, as they may have other places that are more important to them and help them spiritually. For example, the Himalayan mountains are where the Ganges begin, or where the river Ganges begins, and is symbolically closer to God as it is so high up. Many Hindus may feel that no particular place is more important, as the Atman resides in each of us all the time, and the most important thing to do is look inward through meditation rather than go to a particular place. Maybe Varanasi has become too crowded as well, and will not provide inner peace and tranquility that they might need to feel connected to Brahman. Spirituality is important on a more personal level, and no authorities can say for sure that Varanasi is the most important place. Many might prefer their local mandir or go to the Kumbh Mela festival. And then when you've again made at least a couple of points and explained all of them as much as you can, then leave another line to show the examiner that now you're moving on to your conclusion. The reason for doing this is so that when the examiner looks at your answer, they'll immediately see, I agree because, and some points, however, and some points, and then they'll see that it's concluded. So it already puts the idea in their mind that your answer is going to be the top level because it fulfills all the criteria. So anyway, I would start by just saying to conclude, and then just write what your actual opinion is in a sentence or two. You might refer to things you've already said, or just think of a final other point to sort of round it off somehow. So I say, to conclude, as there are so many sacred and important places to visit on a spiritual journey, it makes little sense to say that any place is the most important. Okay, and then once you've looked back at your answer, hopefully you'll see that we've made a point there about it being the birthplace of Lord Shiva, and expanded on it and evaluated it. We've said it's on the river Ganges, which is an important place because that river helps them to get good karma and cleanses them of their sins. Some people put their ashes in, so again, that's why it's important. And just the atmosphere generally there is going to be pretty spiritual because lots of pilgrims go there. So there's 4 points there, all expanded on a little bit and explained. And then again, the point there that there are other places that they could visit, and then an example to elaborate on that. No particular place is more important because the Atman resides in each of us, and then again another sentence to develop that point. And then finally, one point that just says how Varanasi might be a bit commercialized and that kind of thing. Oh, and the fact that no authority in particular can say that Varanasi is definitely the best place to go. No one can say that. There's no overall person in charge of Hinduism. It's lots of different traditions. So again, if you do that, I'm not saying you have to have 4 points on both sides, but that's just a good indicator. If you've got 4 points on both sides and you know that you've explained and developed each of those, then it doesn't have to be totally even, but it shows you that you've definitely given reasoned arguments to support both sides. And then with your conclusion there, it just caps it off to make, hopefully, any examiner just look at that and go, hey, I'm going to give this 12. Okay, so good stuff.